Today we witness a new wind sweeping across Africa, not a storm of destruction, but a rising force of unity, dignity, and purpose. For too long, our continent has been painted with the brush of division. Colonial borders, foreign interests, and internal strife kept us apart, Africans at home from Africans abroad, and nations from one another. But something has shifted. A spirit has risen that reminds us that our roots run deeper than the lines drawn on maps. A leader has emerged, not one obsessed with power or wealth, but one grounded in the soil of the people, someone who listens to the rhythm of the land and speaks the language of the people's pain, hopes, and dreams. This spirit calls on Africans everywhere to reclaim their voice. It doesn't whisper from ivory towers, it roars from the hearts of the youth, from the hands of farmers, from the voices of mothers, from the sacrifice of those who have refused to kneel before injustice. It stretches its arms across oceans, telling the diaspora, "You are not lost, you are not forgotten." Its children have been scattered, its borders drawn without consent, and its wealth drained without recompense. Yet, even through the darkness, a pulse remained, the pulse of unity, pride, and collective memory. Today, that pulse has turned into a drumbeat, calling Africans home, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. It is a call to remember that no matter the distance between us, we are one people. From the deserts of the Sahel to the mountains of Ethiopia, from the streets of Soweto to the boroughs of London and the neighborhoods of Brooklyn, there is a shared fire, a shared rhythm, and a shared future. This movement acknowledges that the continent cannot rise alone, and neither can its diaspora. They are two halves of a powerful whole, destined to move forward together. This renewed unity is not being dictated from elite institutions or international bodies. It is rising from the grassroots. It is evident in the voices of young Pan-African thinkers, artists, and activists reclaiming their roots. It is seen in the efforts of communities abroad who are building bridges back to Africa through investment, education, cultural revival, and advocacy. It is heard in the language of pride that now colors conversations about Africa, where once only shame and pity dominated. A shift is occurring in the global African psyche. Africa is no longer the place we escaped from. It is now the place we look to, the place we belong to, and the place we are called to build. This spirit of unity does not ignore the scars of history, it confronts them. The memory of slavery, colonization, and cultural erasure still lingers, but instead of using that memory as a chain, we are using it as fuel. There is a deepening understanding that our struggles have not been isolated. Whether facing racial injustice in Western cities or poverty and political instability in African towns, the root of these struggles is often the same, a system built to suppress African agency and potential. The unity we are now witnessing seeks to dismantle that system, not with bitterness, but with vision and purpose. Technology and communication have played a critical role in this awakening. For the first time in history, Africans from across the globe can speak to each other instantly, share their stories, collaborate, and support one another. Social media platforms, digital communities, and online movements have become modern-day drum circles, spaces where ideas are exchanged, where solidarity is nurtured, and where action is mobilized. African music, fashion, and thought are no longer just local phenomena, they are global forces, powered by a youth that is no longer asking for permission to be proud. This unity also manifests in resistance. More and more, African nations and peoples are pushing back against control and foreign interference. There is a growing demand for transparency, sovereignty, and self-respect. People are questioning the aid narrative, the debt traps, and the extractive deals that have robbed Africa of its wealth. Instead, they are calling for partnerships built on equality and mutual benefit, and this call is being echoed by Africans living abroad who have seen firsthand how their homelands are portrayed and treated. The beauty of this movement is that it is not about uniformity, it is about harmony. Africa is vast and diverse, with over 1,000 languages and countless traditions. Yet, beneath that diversity lies a common thread, a desire for dignity, self-expression, and unity. This spirit respects differences while celebrating shared identity. It embraces every African, whether from Lagos or Lusaka, from Harlem or Havana. A new generation is rising, fierce, unapologetic, and focused. The story of Africa is no longer being written by outsiders. It is being reclaimed, rewritten, and reborn by Africans everywhere. This is the new spirit of unity, one that refuses to be broken, one that thrives on connection, and one that is lighting the path for generations to come. Rejection of colonial legacies. They do not carry the burden of inferiority. They walk with the knowledge that Africa's time is now, and they carry their ancestors with them as they step into a future defined on their own terms. This is not just political. It is cultural, it is spiritual, it is deeply human, and it is unstoppable. The era of division imposed by colonial borders, foreign exploitation, and internal conflict is being replaced by a consciousness that values indigenous knowledge, self-determination, and Pan-African solidarity. This is not merely a shift in rhetoric. It is a deep, transformative awakening taking place across the continent and within the diaspora. Africa is confronting its history, not to remain trapped in the past, but to take ownership of its future with clarity and pride. No longer willing to carry the weight of imposed narratives, Africans are rising to tell their own stories, shape their own policies, and build systems that reflect their values, not foreign interests. For decades, colonial powers drew artificial borders across the continent, slicing through ethnic groups, languages, and cultures with no regard for the lives they were altering. These divisions were designed to weaken unity and make control easier. They created conflicts where none existed, manufactured identities to fuel division, and exploited difference as a weapon. But now, across the continent, there is a growing realization that these borders do not define who we are. While nations remain, the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood across regions is becoming stronger than the flags or lines drawn on a map. More Africans are speaking of unity, of shared struggle, and of common destiny. The rejection of colonial legacies also means rejecting the idea that Africa must forever remain in a subordinate position, economically, culturally, or politically. It is about reclaiming autonomy in every sense. Economically, this means resisting exploitative trade deals, challenging economic policies, and finding new paths for growth that serve the interests of the people, not foreign corporations or institutions. Many countries are beginning to demand control over their natural resources and are questioning long-standing arrangements that benefit external powers while leaving African populations in poverty. The understanding is clear. Africa is rich, not only in minerals, but in minds, cultures, and innovation, and it deserves to control its wealth. In the realm of culture and knowledge, this new consciousness is rejecting the colonial idea that Western ways of knowing and being are superior. Indigenous knowledge systems, which sustained African societies for centuries, are being revived and respected once again. Traditional agriculture, healing methods, conflict resolution practices, and philosophies are no longer being dismissed as backward, but recognized as sources of strength and sustainability. African languages are being promoted, traditional attire embraced, and local histories taught with pride. This cultural reclamation is not an act of nostalgia. It is a necessary step in building confidence and identity among younger generations who have long been told their heritage is inferior. Self-determination is also taking root politically. More leaders and movements are beginning to emerge with the courage to stand against foreign pressure and dictate terms that serve their people first. The message is clear. Africa is not a playground for global superpowers. It is a continent of sovereign nations with the right to determine their own destinies. This resistance often comes at a cost, politically, economically, even personally, but it is being embraced as a necessary price for true freedom. Across the continent, young people in particular are demanding accountability, transparency, and independence. They are rejecting puppet governments and foreign-backed agendas and pushing for leadership that is bold, visionary, and rooted in the realities of the African people. This rejection of colonial legacies is not a call for isolation, but for dignity. It is not about turning away from the world, but about engaging with it on equal terms. Pan-African solidarity is growing precisely because people are realizing that only through unity can Africa reclaim its rightful place in global affairs, whether through continental trade agreements, regional security collaborations, or cultural exchanges between nations and diasporic communities. There is a drive to reconnect the fractured pieces of a once whole civilization. The diaspora is also deeply engaged in this movement. Many descendants of enslaved Africans and those displaced by colonial disruption are reconnecting with their roots, contributing skills, capital, and vision to the continent's rebirth. They too are rejecting the colonial lie that Africa is a land of despair. They are seeing it now for what it truly is, a land of opportunity, history, and profound human potential. This consciousness, once dormant, is now awake. The chains of psychological colonization are being broken. Africans are realizing that they do not need to mimic or beg. They only need to remember, to believe, and to build. The era of exploitation is being replaced by an era of emancipation, an emancipation of thought, of identity, and of future. What we are witnessing is not a moment, but a movement. A generation is rising with the courage to tear down what was imposed and to rebuild what is truly theirs. This is the rejection of colonial legacies, a bold step towards self-defined destiny. Empowerment through authentic leadership. True leadership now rises from the will of the people, grounded, humble, and committed to justice, refusing to serve foreign interests and instead focused on African dignity and independence. This marks a profound shift in how leadership is viewed and practiced across the African continent. No longer are leaders judged by how well they align with foreign powers or how much praise they receive from international institutions. Instead, they are measured by their service to the people, their defense of national sovereignty, and their ability to inspire unity, pride, and purpose among their citizens. For too long, leadership in Africa was shaped by external interests. Colonial regimes imposed systems designed not to empower, but to extract. After independence, many nations fell into the hands of leaders who continued this pattern, often backed and protected by powerful nations in exchange for access to resources, markets, or influence. These leaders built palaces while their people starved, invested in security forces while education crumbled, and spoke of progress while selling their nation's futures to the highest bidder. But now, the people are awake. They have seen the damage of betrayal and the cost of silence. They are demanding a new kind of leadership, one that serves them, speaks their language, understands their struggle, and leads by example. This authentic leadership is emerging from unexpected places, not necessarily from polished politicians or longtime elites, but from individuals who carry the pain of the people in their hearts. They walk the streets with the youth, they speak the truth without fear, and they act not for applause but for principle. These are leaders who refuse to be puppets. They do not travel the world seeking approval from former colonizers. Instead, they travel through their own countries, listening to farmers, students, mothers, and workers. They do not speak in rehearsed diplomatic jargon. They speak in the raw, urgent voice of their people's reality. What makes this leadership powerful is not just its rhetoric, but its courage. It takes courage to say no to foreign interference. It takes courage to reject exploitative aid or unjust trade agreements. It takes courage to confront internal corruption and to place national interest above personal gain. But this courage is now being rewarded, not by foreign powers, but by the people themselves. Across the continent, we see citizens rallying around those who defend their dignity, who put Africa first, and who lead with integrity rather than fear. This kind of leadership also places a deep emphasis on justice. It recognizes that independence is not only political, but economic, cultural, and psychological. Real leaders today are focusing on land reform, equitable wealth distribution, local industry development, and education rooted in African values. They understand that justice means giving every citizen a stake in the nation, not just a select few. They are committed to transparency and accountability, knowing that leadership without responsibility leads only to decay. Moreover, these leaders are not afraid to dream. While the past was filled with those who managed decline and obeyed instructions from abroad, the present is being shaped by visionaries who imagine a strong, united, and self-reliant Africa. They believe in building new institutions, fostering regional cooperation, and empowering the next generation. They see Africa not as a dependent continent, but as a rising force, capable of solving its own problems and shaping its own future. One of the most significant aspects of this leadership is its humility. Authentic leaders do not place themselves above the people. They do not see leadership as a privilege, but as a responsibility. They speak less about their own power and more about the power of the people. They open space for dialogue, listen before acting, and admit when they are wrong. In this humility lies true strength, for it fosters trust, and trust is the foundation of national unity and progress. Young Africans, especially, are responding to this kind of leadership. They are no longer inspired by titles or foreign degrees. They are inspired by authenticity, by truth, and by vision. They are organizing, resisting, building, and creating under the guidance of leaders who empower rather than control. They are no longer waiting to be rescued, they are being mobilized to rescue themselves. This transformation is still unfolding. It faces resistance, both internally and externally, but it is clear that the tide has turned. The age of empty suits and foreign scripts is coming to an end. A new chapter of African leadership is being written, one that stands firm in the face of pressure, listens to the heartbeat of the people, and walks the long road of justice with courage and humility. This is the age of authentic leadership. It is not perfect, but it is real. It does not claim to have all the answers, but it dares to ask the right questions. It does not serve empires, it serves the people. And through this service, it is restoring what Africa has always needed most: dignity, independence, and hope. Diaspora reconnection Africans abroad are being called not just to return physically, but to contribute spiritually, economically, and intellectually to the rebirth and progress of the continent. This call is not a demand rooted in guilt or obligation. It is a powerful invitation, a shared journey, one that links the past, present, and future of a people who, despite being scattered across the globe, remain deeply connected by identity, history, and purpose. The African diaspora is vast, stretching from the Americas and Europe to the Caribbean and Asia. It includes descendants of those who were taken during the transatlantic slave trade, as well as more recent migrants who left the continent in search of opportunity, stability, or education. For decades, many in the diaspora have lived with a complex sense of belonging, African in identity, yet distant from the land itself. Now, that distance is shrinking. The reconnection that is unfolding is not just emotional, it is strategic, intentional, and transformative. This new wave of reconnection goes beyond symbolic gestures or cultural celebrations. It is a reawakening, a realization that Africa's rise depends not only on those within its borders, but also on the talents, resources, and experiences of its global family. Across continents, Africans abroad are stepping forward, not to speak for Africa, but to speak with it, to share skills, transfer knowledge, invest in local economies, build institutions, and amplify African narratives on the world stage. Spiritually, the reconnection is restoring something long buried, a sense of rootedness and ancestral pride. Many in the diaspora grew up disconnected from their heritage, taught to view Africa through a lens of poverty, chaos, and underdevelopment. But now, the image is changing. More people are seeking out their roots, learning African languages, embracing traditional names, understanding indigenous belief systems, and proudly identifying as African. This spiritual homecoming is powerful. It heals historical wounds and fosters a sense of unity that transcends geography. Economically, the diaspora is playing an increasingly vital role in Africa's transformation. Remittances have long been a lifeline for many families on the continent, but today, the involvement goes much deeper. Diasporans are launching businesses in Africa, partnering with local entrepreneurs, investing in startups, and creating platforms that link African talent with global markets. They are using their financial power not just to support loved ones, but to build systems of empowerment in agriculture, education, healthcare, tech, and more. These investments are not driven solely by profit, but by a desire to uplift communities and contribute to long-term development. Intellectually, the diaspora is bridging worlds. African scholars, professionals, and creatives abroad are bringing global perspectives back to the continent, while also challenging dominant narratives about Africa in their countries of residence. Whether through teaching, publishing, activism, or innovation, they are rewriting the story of Africa, shifting it from one of dependency to one of capability and promise. They are building academic networks, mentoring young leaders, and creating content that reflects Africa's diversity, resilience, and genius. Technology has made this reconnection easier and more dynamic than ever. Social media platforms, digital education, and global conferences now allow for real-time collaboration between Africans on the continent and those in the diaspora. Movements are being organized across borders. Campaigns for justice, awareness, and solidarity are going viral. Conversations that once required physical travel now take place instantly, strengthening bonds and creating new alliances. Importantly, this reconnection is not one-sided. It is not only the diaspora returning to Africa. Africa is also reaching out to the diaspora with open arms. Governments, institutions, and communities are recognizing the value of this global network and actively creating pathways for return and engagement. Dual citizenship, diaspora investment forums, cultural exchange programs, and homeland tours are becoming more common. These initiatives signal a broader understanding that Africa cannot afford to exclude any part of itself. This movement is grounded in love, not a sentimental love, but a fierce, determined love that believes Africa deserves more. It is the love of a child for a mother, a builder for their homeland, a visionary for their people, and it is driven by a shared dream to see Africa not merely survive, but thrive, not merely catch up, but lead. Diaspora reconnection is one of the most hopeful signs of Africa's future. It is a bridge between memory and possibility, between suffering and triumph. It is a reclaiming of what was lost and a commitment to what can still be won. Through this reconnection, the African family, long divided by time, distance, and trauma, is becoming whole again. And in that wholeness lies a new strength, a strength that says Africa's greatness will not be defined by borders but by bonds, a strength that honors the past, answers the call of the present, and boldly builds the future together. Self-reliance and cultural pride Africa is embracing its languages, cultures, and traditions as sources of strength rather than shame, asserting its identity without needing external validation. This marks a deep and necessary transformation in the mindset of a people who for generations were taught to look outside themselves for value, solutions, and recognition. The age of dependency, where progress was defined by how closely a nation aligned with foreign standards, is giving way to a bold, unapologetic affirmation of what it truly means to be African. For too long, colonial and post-colonial systems ingrained the idea that African ways were inferior. Indigenous knowledge was dismissed as primitive, traditional practices were discouraged, and local languages were suppressed in favor of European tongues. The result was a continent rich in diversity yet fractured in confidence. But that era is ending. Africa is now reclaiming what was devalued. The very elements that were once considered obstacles to progress are being revealed as keys to authentic development and true liberation. Languages, for instance, are no longer seen as a hindrance to unity or modernity. Instead, they are recognized as carriers of wisdom, culture, and identity. Across the continent, there is a growing movement to revitalize indigenous languages, not just as a form of cultural preservation, but as a means of empowerment. Education in local languages is being promoted, literature is being published in native tongues, and media outlets are producing content that reflects the voice of the people. This linguistic resurgence affirms that Africa does not need to erase its voice to be heard on the global stage. Traditional knowledge and practices are also being embraced in new ways. From herbal medicine and organic farming to ancestral spirituality and community-based justice systems, Africans are looking inward to find solutions that are sustainable, context-specific, and rooted in centuries of lived experience. This is not a rejection of modern science or global innovation, but a recognition that progress must be rooted in identity to be meaningful. When Africa combines its deep heritage with modern tools, it creates something powerful, solutions that are not imported or imposed, but homegrown and enduring. This cultural pride is also visible in the arts. African music, fashion, dance, and storytelling are no longer confined to local appreciation. They are celebrated globally, and more importantly, proudly by Africans themselves. Young designers are blending traditional fabrics with modern styles. Musicians are using local rhythms and languages to tell global stories. Filmmakers are bringing African narratives to international screens without altering them to fit foreign tastes. This artistic revival is not just about aesthetics, it is a statement of identity, a refusal to conform, and a celebration of self. In everyday life, more Africans are turning to their own cultures for inspiration and guidance. Traditional attire is worn not only during ceremonies, but in workplaces, schools, and public events. Festivals that were once fading are being revived with energy and pride. African cuisines are being as sources of health, heritage, and community. Even beauty standards are shifting. Dark skin, natural hair, and traditional body art are now celebrated instead of hidden. This return to cultural pride is deeply linked to the spirit of self-reliance. Africa is learning to stand on its own, not out of isolation, but out of intention. There is a growing understanding that dependence, whether economic, political, or cultural, leaves nations vulnerable. True freedom comes when a people define their path, control their resources, and honor their identity. Self-reliance means developing systems that serve African realities, not copy-pasted models from elsewhere. It means building economies that benefit local communities, nurturing talent that stays and thrives at home, and crafting policies that reflect the continent's values and aspirations. This mindset is spreading especially among the youth. Across villages and cities, students and young professionals are asking deeper questions about who they are and what kind of Africa they want to build. They are rejecting the idea that success means leaving the continent. Instead, they are choosing to stay, to build, and to lead. Africa no longer needs to seek permission to be proud. It simply is. They are launching startups rooted in local problems, creating art that tells African stories, and forming movements that push for justice, inclusion, and innovation. And they are doing it with a deep sense of pride in who they are. Africa's embrace of its culture is not a step backward. It is a leap forward into a future that is both modern and authentic. The world may still try to define Africa by its challenges, but Africans are now defining themselves by their strength, creativity, and resilience. They are no longer asking for recognition. They are recognizing themselves. This is the essence of self-reliance and cultural pride, the confidence to know that everything needed to rise, strength, wisdom, beauty, power, has always been here, in the language, in the soil, in the stories, and in the people. Youth-driven Pan-African future. The youth, both in Africa and across the diaspora, are being inspired to shape their own future, boldly, proudly, and in unity, as architects of a liberated and thriving continent. This generation, unlike any before, is rising with a clear sense of purpose and identity. They are not weighed down by colonial inferiority complexes or old loyalties to external powers. Instead, they are driven by a hunger for change and a vision of a new Africa, an Africa that stands tall, speaks for itself, and commands respect in global conversations. Across the continent, young people are stepping into roles of leadership, innovation, and activism with determination and energy. They are refusing to accept the status quo, the cycles of corruption, underdevelopment, and dependence that have plagued previous generations. They are asking difficult questions about governance, justice, economic models, and cultural expression. And they are demanding answers not tomorrow, but now. This is a generation that is not satisfied with survival. They want transformation. Technology has given Africa's youth unprecedented access to information, connectivity, and platforms to share their voices. Social media has become more than just a space for entertainment. It is now a tool for mobilization, education, and community building. Pan-African conversations are happening in real time. A young activist in Accra can organize with peers in Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Dakar. A designer in Lagos can collaborate with a filmmaker in the Caribbean or a coder in Toronto. The digital age has torn down many of the barriers that once divided the continent from its diaspora, and young Africans are seizing that opportunity to build something bigger than borders. This Pan-Africanism is not the theoretical, elite-driven idealism of the past. It is a lived, practical reality for this generation. They see their struggle not as isolated national challenges, but as a shared continental journey. They understand that the colonial legacy of division must be dismantled if true freedom is to be achieved. They embrace one another, regardless of language, region, or history, because they know that unity is not just a dream, it is a necessity. Education is another battlefield where the youth are asserting their influence. They are no longer content with outdated colonial curricula that fail to reflect African realities. They are advocating for education that empowers, not just instructs, one that includes African history, values, and knowledge systems. They want skills that prepare them to build industries, solve local problems, and create opportunities where none existed before. They are demanding not just access to education, but ownership over its direction. The youth are also challenging the global narrative about Africa. For years, the continent has been portrayed through a lens of poverty, conflict, and need. But young Africans are flipping that script. They are telling their own stories through film, literature, photography, and digital media. They are redefining African excellence and showing the world that Africa is not a place of pity, but a source of innovation, creativity, and strength. They are doing this not for foreign validation, but for self-respect. Economically, young Africans are leading a revolution in entrepreneurship. Faced with limited job prospects in traditional sectors, they are creating their own paths. From tech startups and agro-innovation to fashion brands and online services, They are proving that African problems can be solved by African solutions. They are rejecting the narrative of dependency and stepping boldly into the arena of self-sufficiency. With limited resources but unlimited creativity, they are making things happen on their terms. Even in the political arena, youth voices are growing louder. Across multiple countries, young people are organizing, voting, protesting, and even running for office. They are no longer waiting for elders to hand over the reins. They are reaching for them with courage and clarity. They are demanding accountability and transparency, and they are calling out corruption without fear. In doing so, they are reshaping what leadership looks like in Africa, not as a position of privilege, but as a service to the people. Perhaps most powerful is the spiritual and cultural renewal being led by the youth. They are reconnecting with their roots, embracing African traditions, names, languages, and values. They are not ashamed of where they come from. They are inspired by it. In music, art, fashion, and everyday life, they are expressing their identity with pride and passion. This cultural confidence is the fuel that powers their Pan-African dreams. What we are witnessing is not just a shift, it is a movement. The youth of Africa and the diaspora are no longer content with being told who they are or what they can become. They are defining that for themselves. They are building bridges between continents, tearing down walls of division, and lighting fires of hope in communities that had long been forgotten. The future of Africa is being written not in the offices of foreign donors or the pages of history books, but in the hearts and hands of its youth. Bold, proud, and united, they are stepping forward not as victims of history, but as authors of the future. Their time is now, and they are ready.